Yo, what's good, folks? Mike Bravo here, Kimichi Pili, Hiyaki Sapichu. I'm trying to get the habit of making content and just share my thoughts. Inspired or inclined to make share some thoughts and some focuses as far as inspired by, I guess, the so-called Hispanic Heritage Day that just started on Sunday, as well as, today's Mexican Independence Day. And honestly, I totally forgot about it because I don't really partake in, I guess, like Mexican national stuff. I don't really focus on that. I focus more on Mexicanness, Mexicanidad as like from an indigenous centric worldview. So like the national, I can acknowledge it and acknowledge the indigenous connotations a lot of these Mexican holidays have, or the implications to our indigenous well-being that it has, but I don't really, I always try to just focus more on the indigenous stuff, which is the predominant essence of Mexicanidad. And I think a lot of times, a lot of, us Chicanos, Mexicans, we get that mixed up, because we occupy a interesting or kind of confusing place, especially being in the United States, or the United States being on us, in the sense that like we're indigenous as fuck. We're indigenous AF. Like there's no question about it. But a lot of time it gets obscured because our Spanish language, our Spanish surnames. So like in the psyche, and the context of American United States society, a lot of times they have their view of what indigenous is. The American Indians, they speak English too, aside from their native languages, of course. And at the same time, the whole Latin Hispanic, it ties us in with Spain a lot, whatever, too. And then like the media always does its best to try to whitewash us. So yeah, it's a unique space that we have a unique lane that we have in terms of our identity, And anyways, but I don't really I'm not here to like celebrate Hispanic Heritage Day or sorry Hispanic Heritage Month. To me, it's just it's a lot of this is like token gestures. I understand like there might be some value in representing and acknowledging people. I get that, but for me, I'm all about the tangibles. I'm all about the equity. I'm about about real deal. I'm really not about this tokenism and this being tokenized and all that stuff. The lip service when things are still pretty. We're still getting the short stick, the short end of things. But the Hispanic Heritage Day again, just touching on real quick the just the Eurocentricity of the Hispanic and Latino labels. That's a whole topic in of itself. But for those who might not be aware, Hispanic and Latino, it's just like they're both two sides of the same coin. And they're both designed to kind of whitewash and erase primarily the indigenous people of Mexico, Central America, and I guess South America too. And of course the African and other folks, but predominantly it's mostly used to erase the people of color over here and put them under a Eurocentric Spanish umbrella. That's why I don't use it as a. I'm totally 100%, 110% against using those terms when it comes to people of Mesoamerican, brown, indigenous diaspora. Again, predominantly Mexico, Central America, peoples. Yeah, so just I don't use that term at all, and I really encourage people to really understand and the implications of how those terms came to be, and the negative effects it has on us as indigenous people, whether people might have a hard time seeing that or not. Like you definitely need to understand where that comes from. And I have a website, sixsunriders.com. I'll put a link in the video. If I put it on YouTube or whatever, I'll put links in there, and you can do further reading on why the Hispanic and Latino labels are no good, and they should be we should just do away with those. There's a lot literature there, so I'll throw that in the links whenever I make it. I also want to touch on because some people I've talked to about because obviously there's some of us who understand to a degree, who might not be as indigenous minded or indigenous, acknowledging of themselves or the culture of Mexicans, but there's still quite a few that still don't gravitate or don't like the Hispanic label or the Latino label. They use the Mexican label, and they have shared ideas to the effect of having like a Mexican Heritage Month, which I get the direction, and I've heard this from a few people too. But again, to these people don't really, they're kind of lacking in an indigenous understanding, not really understand the indigeneity, the strong indigenous quotient of Mexicanidad, of being Mexican. I said we hold a very unique space, like as far as like in the psyche of one, how we understand ourselves, and two, how I guess us, speaking from a California, Southern California perspective, United States perspective, it's people don't understand us as indigenous because for various reasons. Obviously, the Mexican area was conquered a lot earlier than it was in the Americas. I'm sorry, in the United States area, as well as us speaking Spanish, and then just the fact that Mexico as a country once owned a lot of the Southwest, and so once the U.S. took that, there's been like a consistent anti-Mexican propaganda being pushed, so there's been a lot of, undermine of who we are and our identity and things of that nature. But anyways, so people don't really understand us in the sense of, how they understand American Indians or indigenous. And then again, or they think, oh yeah, we're equivalent to like, Antonio Banderas or Julio Iglesias, these people of Spanish, that they kind of just blend us together, which, again, totally erases us and other, African and other people who've migrated to, the so-called Latin countries. But I think if we were to do something like that, it should aim to be more of keep it native oriented, something more along the lines of Mesoamerican Day, or something that's inclusive, even though, again, Mexicans comprise like 60+% of all so-called, Hispanic or Latinos in the country. And if you understand us as Mesoamerican people, as a Mesoamerican contingent of indigenous people, that's about like 80% plus of, also called, Hispanic and Latinos in the United States. So if we were to do something like that, it would have to be something that disconnects us from the, clutches of Latino, Latin, Hispanic identity, and orient us more towards our indigeneity and indigenous identity, but at the same time, like, distinguishes us from, I guess, the American U.S. area natives, right? Yeah. So if we would do something like that, I think that's how it should be done. I just bring that up because people have brought up this idea before, and I can't get behind anything that's gonna reinforce, borders or anything that's gonna continue to disconnect us and not move us towards fully orienting ourselves mentally, spiritually, politically, and otherwise towards our indigenous roots, which has always been, it's been the best formula for us. When we've been at our best, our healthiest, our strongest, it's always been because our indigenous culture, our values, again, too, realizing that a lot of those cultures and values and spiritual ways have been demonized, or they've been, co-opted or renamed to something else, so just to be mindful of that too. So I just want to just put that out there as far as the idea of a Mexican Heritage Month or whatever. And with that too, I want to kind of just go into, I want to share some imperatives, or things I think we need to focus on. Again, too, this is just me coming from, LA, West LA experience, Los Angeles experience, Southern California experience, United States experience, what have you. So, if I mentioned before, just a little background on me. I'm fifth generation Chicano, right here, based in Venice, California. West Los, Four Corners, what they call the Four Corners area here, and a lot of my I've been doing like activism for I'm gonna say about 25 years now, something like that, since about 2000, 2001. It's been a minute anyway. So it's been I've worn a lot of different hats as far as the work that I do. It's indigenous militancy, indigenous education work, um, spiritual events, real things to me that try to be like, make things tangible. It's not enough to know or read sometimes, and it's more about how do we incorporate, how do we integrate that into our lifestyle and things of that nature, And the last maybe 4, 5, 6 years or whatever here in Venice, a lot of my work has been more focused on anti-gentrification work, anti-racism work. Again, it's all connected. The decolonizing work, the pro-indigenous work. It's all related. Anti-racism, anti-gentrification. So I have a lot of experience as far as like working. I was in neighborhood council for 2 terms. Very politically active out here. A big shaker and mover out in this area. And again, always remaining indigenous centric in how I approach and do things. So that's kind of the background I'm coming from with some of these perspectives, and just seeing things happen in the country, and again things happen to me here, and I'm seeing here in Venice, and I see them reflected in the I see Venice as a pretty accurate microcosm of what's happening on the bigger, state and national stage. So there's things are, I want to give that understanding. I also want to, I don't know if it's called a disclaimer, but just really, there's so much to discuss and understand when I'm going the things I'm bringing up, but I really encourage people to understand a few concepts. One, white supremacy, understanding what it really is. I'm not going to go into it right now too much, but white hegemony. Really understand what white supremacy is. That's gonna, that's super key to understanding and predicting how things are going to move. Also the concept of lateral oppression. So a lot of times, so some of the things that I'm going to mention or touch on the issue of lateral oppression. That's basically kind of like when other people of color, other colonized people do things, they wield the systems of power, primarily white systems of power, white supremacy against other, marginalized people. And again, these are just in different contexts. White supremacy puts us in a position where sometimes we have to, I don't say we have to, but it inclines people to, turn against their values or do things that they claim that they're against, or things that have been done to them, so that's, so again, that's lateral oppression. Also the concept of it's called the first circle teaching, and again, it's on my Six Sunriders website. I'm gonna put a link in the caption or whatever for the video as well, for all the things I'm talking about. It comes down to, bitch, you can't give what you don't have, right? So like, you can't fight for peace, or you can't create peace in the world if you don't have peace within yourself. You can't go and create justice in the world if you don't have some sense of justice within yourself, right? So this is like speaking from an individual level, and then going on to, let's say, the second circle would be like your family, and then third circle would be like your community, and so on and so forth. But in this case, I'm talking about Mexican people, Chicano people, brown people, however we want to think of it, and for this particular explanation. So I'm going to go down just a list I made like randomly, about things I wanted to touch on that I think are important to reflect on, to really understanding our really understanding our economic and social power. There's a thing called the GDP. I think it's like gross domestic production, or I forget, but basically it alludes to the economic and social power of people, right? So it says that U.S. Latinos, again, again, Mexicans, Central Americans, Mesoamerican people being like 80% of these so-called Latinos in the United States, have the fifth highest GDP in the world, I want to say, which basically says that we have, just strong economic power, production and value, whatever, which we should already know that, but really reflect on ways to harness that and continue to nurture that, because I think most of us can agree as Chicano activists, as brown activists oriented, and a brown Chicano worldview, a brown indigenous oriented worldview, that in politics, that we always continue to get the short end of the short stick, the short end of everything. Even though we have, we're the people of the land, we have we're strong culturally, we're strong economically, and all that too, but we keep getting the short end of the stick politically, for some reason. It's time that we need to crack down on that. But again, just using that understanding as a point of inspiration to kind of figure how we can harness that power. I think, going back to some of the complexities I mentioned earlier about our identity and us not knowing our history, and just how the psyche of how we view ourselves and how other people view us. And I think a lot of it is a lot of these issues of why we haven't harnessed that power, it comes down to our lack of understanding who we really are, our history and our identity, however we choose to identify, even though we do definitely we are living in a indigenous trajectory, for sure, whether people want to admit it or not. I want to suggest, or focus on this, like, again, this is kind of complemented from the GDP item. It's really try to build power, building power first within our own demographic first. And the reason I say that, again, from my own experience and the experience I've seen from other people, is a lot of times brown people, Chicano people, again, I'm sure not all the time, but from what I've seen a lot, is that we enter into these political realms or whatever, and we're kind of where it's more Anglo dominant, other non-Chicano, other non-native people of color, very Americanized or whatever, like they dominate these spaces. And again, we have a lot of power and in our culture and how we represent and how we show up and to support things. And other people who are more institutionally embedded in the American system, we're still oftentimes we're at a disadvantage, in the sense that, like, yeah, they'll come and they'll use our power, they'll take whatever we have to give, and and our support. But when it comes time for our initiatives, or for us to really share that power or have a seat, a lot of times they don't show up for us. And again, too, like a person like myself, getting very passionate and believing in these issues, anti-racism, solidarity and what have you. We need to do all that too, but at the same time, like, if we don't build a system of power within like-minded people of Chicano, indigenous background, it leaves more room for us to be taken advantage of by other groups who are more institutionally embedded in the political system or institutional systems where we might reside. And yeah, and I also encourage that for any ethnic group, really, because again, too, like, if you come as a group versus being scattered individuals, like, it allows you come as a stronger unit. You come in as your message. You're more focused, and there's more focus and more respect, and you have less likely of a chance of getting abused by any other people of the system trying to pull the okey doke on you. And that way, when people do meet up, let's say two different groups of, two non-white, two other non-white groups or two ethnic groups meet up, and if both people have, they have some form of organization and power that they built, even if it's like a handful or a small coalition of people, that, one, it makes just the politics stronger and makes the focus stronger. And again, two, it alleviates any possibility of people abusing power if we come in as individuals. So definitely moving as a unit and not, you know, getting involved in politics or other political dominant scenes that where you don't have a strong contingent. You're not moving as a contingent. Another item is Chicanos getting our tangibles, getting our equity. Chicanos love to represent. They love to support whatever. We're strong people culturally, economically. Like mentioned before. But I see here a lot of and just a lot of places I go where there's Chicano communities in general. Like it's people love to use our culture with lowriders or the cultural dancing, and things of that nature. Our the imagery of our Chicano Cholo culture sometimes, at least the friendlier elements of that symbolism. And people, they love using that for, their branding of diversity and inclusiveness and, whatever to bank and to, get whatever they have going on off the ground. But when it comes time to actual, tangibles, like actually, equity with its rightness, writing us into official narratives of whatever local histories in a respectable, true, non-tokenized way, as well as, really allowing authentic indigenous Chicano, brown, Mexican, Mesoamerican leaders to be at the table and making those decisions. That's really lacking. We're reading, and whether we're someone who's participating, let's say you have a lowrider or whatever, or we're asking as a brown person asking to participate, and yeah, we're hungry for representation, we're hungry for to alleviate that invisibility and that lack of recognition and that lack of acknowledgement. But at the same time, we need to again build power within our own first. Because people are going to take advantage of that, whether consciously or unconsciously, and really asking, okay, where, if you're from a neighborhood or you're from from a certain area, for the most part who the leaders who are like you are there, right? If you're black or if you're Chicano, if you're Asian, you know more or less, you have a good sense of who the political or cultural leaders are or representatives are in your neighborhood, right? Or in your zone, right? Too, and you ask yourself, okay, are these people, if they're asking this of my community, are my people being represented? Are they given like actual tangibles, or are we just there, just to being used for the visibility and the branding of diversity and inclusion or whatever. So again, asking for tangibles, asking for equity, and making sure that we have that authentic, tangible representation. And then they'll get some person from they'll get some white Brazilian who's a Latino, and they're like, oh yeah, well we have a Latino on the board here, or we have Latinos represented here, and that's not really, again, that's one of the negative aspects of the Latino and Hispanic identity. The labels, it really obscures and undermines the needs and priorities of, brown people of the Mesoamerican diaspora. So yeah, if we're being asked to participate, really ask where's the equity, where's the tangible representation. The next item is journalism and media. So I really feel there's a very, over here in West Los Angeles, the West Side area, I feel there's just a lack of authentic, real, true left progressive media out here. Not only that, but there's a serious lack of black and brown writers, and some of the ones who have kind of made a little name for themselves or whatever, they're more they they adhere more to the white gaze. I'm not too sure if you know what that means, but it's kind of just basically like, they're trying to appeal more to what, the white folks, what they think the white folks want, or impress, with, the sensibilities of white folks, and make things for their, things that they think they like about us, and things of that nature. So that's kind of what the white gaze is, roughly. Or they're just very, there's no, like, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart, their writing or their perspectives apart from any other, Anglo American centric author or creator, right? And again, if they do, it's like some kind of like token, commentary, nothing really that really reflects the reality and the heart and the sentiments of the needs of, again, in this case, the Chicano community, but also the black community as well, or just the again, speaking from, West LA, Venice area of hyper gentrified, once diverse, it's, very white homogenized now, and it's getting worse by the year. It's more imperative that we have our narratives and we have our means, whether it's paper or online publications, knowing how to write and create just general content. I'm not talking about social media. Social media should be some kind of like, it should be an accent. It should be a complementary item, that kind of brings attention to, whatever media or journalism, even if it's like, again, just simply just knowing facts and reporting and documenting things and having perspectives and having a, respectable way to publish them and talk about them and present them and, account for them from our own worldview. That's really important. I see that highly lacking. And so, yeah, that's an imperative that needs to happen as well. Another item is it's Wabo-ism. I'm not too sure if you guys know what that is, or ethnocentrism. So basically, like Wabo, the term Wabo, it's an abbreviation of the term wannabe Aboriginal, Wabo. And basically, it's when people try to co-opt history, mostly, particularly lately, what it is, it's a lot of our black African American brothers and sisters who are co-opting Mesoamerican and indigenous history and rewriting or trying to claim that it's theirs. Like, for instance, like they'll say like, oh yeah, we were already here. The Olmecs were black, we're Africans. The Africans were pyramids. That, a lot of these crazy, like really wild theories. Nothing that could be supported whatsoever. And it's just it's really disturbing, especially because it's so far out. And there's people dismiss this, but it's been going on for a while. But it's kind of generations deep in a lot of the black community. Again, too, these are all like, again, has to be understood within the context of white supremacy and how much both our people have been kept from our real history. Understanding our true history of self, and things of that nature. But there's a strong movement to the point where even a lot of like, activists and like teachers, of African American descent, like they're teaching this or teaching stuff to students, and it's very harmful to teach false history. One, taking people's history, brown and native people's history, but again, two, teaching black folks a false history. They have a rich, deep, history like we do, what I mean? But so there's no need to really take, but again, if you understand in context of white supremacy and the poverty of our education system and again, too, the false history and all that stuff, it's we're kind of put in that position, so that needs to be kept an eye on, and that needs to be challenged and corrected wherever we see it. And it's hard too, because again, too, like a lot of times, we need that black and brown solidarity, but I found that topic keeps coming up, and it keeps proving itself to be a speed bump. There's people that I don't talk to no more because, like, I just, respectfully challenge them. Hey, like, that's not right, But again, too, it's unfortunate, but we really need to kind of correct that and ensure that, we know our history so that we're able to defend it. Because if we're not here to defend it, other people are going to take it. So that needs to be kept an eye on and challenged. Also, another item to keep an eye on is the Wokoso, what I call like the Wokoso movement or Wokoso mentality. Like, I don't like to belittle the term woke. To me, woke is a positive word, and I use the word Wokoso as a sense of, like, it's a play off Mokoso and woke. So kind of I use it to mean that a lot of these younger folks mostly come from academia, which I'm gonna touch on. Like, they're very educated. They're very, like, learn all these dope, new, social concepts and, really dope stuff. But they're very naive and impractical in how they try to apply it, or even worse, weaponize it. As opposed to using it in a constructive way. They use it for more weaponizing, canceling, and things of that nature. And I see this a lot of this a lot of this I see coming out of academia. A lot of kind of anti-Mexican sentiment. We can see this in, how Mecha changed to MEPA, and I think they just changed, nationally anyway. I don't think all chapters changed, but removing, like, Chicano identity, removing Aslan, and of course, we want to be mindful of, how we use these terms, because there's misinterpretation and people often do misuse some of these terms, but to the point where you're, like, starting to erase, they're continuing on this path of demonizing the word Mexican, which, again, too, in this sense, it's in the context of the United States, it has an indigenous connotation to it. It doesn't, not so much the national, referring to the national, politics, but it continues on that those those anti-Mexican sentiments that have propaganda and sentiments that have been embedded since Mexico, since the United States took the Southwest from the nation of Mexico. Again, being naive and not seeing how that kind of plays into that anti-Mexican, anti-Chicano nature. And again, too, if you notice too, like, just how, like, there's this really strong push to put this Latinx label. People are just using it everywhere. It's been, like, even, like, in activism circles, like, it's so, like, people trying to push this whitewashing term, like, even when it's like, I've read studies too where most brown people, again, the majority of so-called Hispanic Latinos being of Mexican descent, and even more so Mesoamerican descent, that they don't really dig that term, but yet it keeps on getting forced down our throat, again, too. And I see, so going back to this Wokoso mentality, where it's, I guess you can say it's a way of a lot of these youngsters coming up in academia, who are maybe unconsciously doing this indigenous brown erasure, anti-Mexican erasure work under the guise of being more conscious or whatever. All the while, again, pushing white supremacy, again, the whitewashing, the invisibility of indigeneity, and what have you. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the solution is to that, but I just kind of keep an eye on that. And, again, going back to the importance of not subscribing to these labels, really challenging these labels and anything that tries to erase or disconnect us from our indigeneity or our Mexicanidad, So yeah, that's another thing to keep an eye on. The next thing is, I guess it's kind of a combined thing to really, support the ethnic studies movement, especially here in California. I'm not too sure how it's going in Arizona or other places, but really support that ethnic studies movement. It's been under attack for a while, and I want to say this in the same breath as supporting, pro-Palestine activism as well. and consciousness as well. Because I'm bringing this up because there's we've both been the victim of Zionist politics, Zionism, and I've never had a positive understanding of Israel. Um, I knew a lot of the military funding, and their role in coups and undermine of democracies and Central America and what have you. I always so I never had a favorable view of them, but ever since they started waging war, the genocide against the Palestinians in October, and learn a lot more. Like I never realized how in depth and entrenched the Zionist lobby is in our everyday lives. You can see this in the media, things not being reported, and there's people scared to say anything, speak out against genocide and what have you. It's really disturbing. And so anyways, I'm tying it back into ethnic studies because a lot of the ethnic studies movement has been undermined by the Zionist lobby here for years. I think they're starting to make strides again because just more critical eye on Zionism, but it's tied in directly, and with that too, I guess also just keeping an eye on Zionism in general as well. Like it's all, like I said, we've always, if you're conscious, you always kind of keep an eye on these things or have maybe a general sense of a general critical eye, like I have on Zionism and the Israeli policy, Israeli politics. But I think we really need to keep an eye on it because they're definitely keeping an eye on us for sure. There's books written by Netanyahu, where he distinctly is acknowledging the power that Chicanos have, the Mexican people in the United States have, and they're very aware of what they call the Palestinian principle. And I guess basically that's where just the where the seed of consciousness for justice and reclamation, the anti-white supremacy, the restoration of land and the pro-indigeneity, how their motives, part of their motive, part of their reasoning for why the U.S. needs to support the Israeli apartheid and the Israeli colonialism of the Palestine area is that if the Palestinians win, what's going to happen to the U.S. next? It's going to inspire, Chicanos and Mexican people in the United States area and other people of that indigenous orientation to rise up and get theirs as well. So it's directly tied in, and the Zionist lobby is pretty much synonymous with the U.S. imperialist lobby. So it's all very deeply connected again. So just keep an eye on that, and those politics and how they're the people in your community or people in your zone are being paid off, or how our move for liberation and advancement and just general prosperity is going to be undermined by the Zionist agenda, Zionist lobby, because it's already happening, it's been happening, and you really need to keep an eye on that. And lastly, I'm going to just leave it as just to really reflect on Mexican, what it really means to be Mexican, what it really means to be indigenous. Especially right now in this election season, some of these, more these Mexican, so-called Latino Trump supporters being a little more vocal and prominent. It's I think this would be a good exercise, just even for myself. I'm gonna do it for myself too. I've been wanting to do it, but just in general, really reflect on what does it mean to be Mexican? What looking back, reflecting on the strong points of our culture and our history. What have we overcome? What have we been against? What values? How does that translate into values? You know what I mean? We don't like oppression. We don't like genocide. We don't like people encroaching and trying to erase us. We don't like people taking land. We don't things, whatever. There's things, certain values. I'm just giving you a quick example. And there's really make a list, like what are really our values as Mexican people, and we can share these ideas later. But like, just really just stop and think about what are these. Make a list, you know. What are we about? What are we against? Now I mean, then think about how that's reflected in who we're choosing to support or what policies we're choosing to support in our politics. You know, I think a lot, we're losing a lot of us again too. You know, understanding our background. You know, the oppression, the psychological impacts of our oppression, and where and the lack of education, not knowing our history and different times, having different resources and things of that nature. It's understandable how people can fall into this comfortability or this way they start to kind of forget who they are and start taking on these traits and these values that aren't really values at all. You know, I mean, it's very detrimental, not just to ourselves as Mexican people, as indigenous people, but just, you know, harmful to the earth, harmful to society, harmful to humanity, you know. And but yeah, you know, focus on what it means and what what it really means to be Mexican or indigenous, and how it translates into, you know, the policies that you might be or people you might be prom- supporting. You know, again too, like just I just it's to me like it just boggles my mind how people, how any like Chicano who claims to be a proud Chicano or Mexican can support Trump. You know, it's just really, you know, I mean, and again, there's not to support Kamala either because she's garbage as well. But you know, Trump's definitely a different level of problematic. Um, but again, you know, just again, we need to reflect on what these values actually mean, what our values are, and what they actually mean. Um, yeah. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching this whole thing. I didn't think it was gonna be this long. You know, I have some of my little notes here, but again, trying to get in the habit of talking on, speaking on certain topics, um, and sharing thoughts. So yeah, thanks for listening, and appreciate it. Peace.